Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Jack Jewell Live. I'm bringing you this on a Saturday because of some commitments I had this week, but I wanted to make sure I still did a live stream for those of you who enjoy that, right? And if you're watching afterwards, hope you enjoy. Lots to get into tonight, so I'm going to jump straight into it. Today, we're going to look at a woke journalist who keeps pressing athletes at the Australian Open tennis tournament to act as political spokespeople and pressing them to comment on Trump's administration. It got interesting. I also want to talk about a genuinely extraordinary academic claim in an upcoming book that Shakespeare was actually a Black Jewish woman. Yes, you heard right. And what this really tells us about the state of higher education and humanities these days. And finally, we're going to look at a resurfaced women's sports panel from last year. Yeah, you say women, but you know, that's a caveat, in which a Muslim lady with a full face veil and a trans woman talk about the appropriate attire to wear in female sports and a contradiction which no one seems to want to admit. And if you stick around till the end, I continue this discussion on Substack, where we're going to look at a politician who is suing the Green Party because they expelled her over criticizing fairy pronouns. Yeah. Remember those neo pronouns? I feel like they've kind of phased out a bit, but they're back. And we're going to jump in straight into our first topic. So I can see some of you in the chat. All right. This is the Somali ICE interview going viral today, right? So this clip has gone viral of a 23-year-old Somali-American activist describing her alleged wrongful ICE detention. ICE are the law enforcement agents going around looking for illegal migrants. Lots of controversy there. But what's made it spread isn't just the accusation she's making against ICE, but it's the bizarre way she explains it, using some weird metaphor of bananas and rice. I know, just wait till you see the clip. To describe Somali culture, and the entire interview just becomes a bit incoherent. So the question here is, was this racial profiling? Is she telling the truth? Is it a lot of skepticism over whether she is lying or people actually believe this woman? You know, there's been so much controversy in Minnesota over the fraud from the Somali community with the daycare centers. Hopefully you've heard of that already. So we are going to have a look at this clip and see what she had to say. Hello. Unmute. Can you explain what you mean? Okay. I see. Sorry, guys. Okay, so I'm gonna remove that. Okay, yes. Right. Okay, let's try that again. So I think you weren't able to hear that, right? Just let me know in the comments. But you heard my intro, so we're going to rewind it and hopefully this works.
So I'm Somali. I'm proud to be Somali. To me, being Somali isn't just eating bananas with rice. It's a lot. It's like it's an interesting thing. It's very hard to describe what it means to be Somali and what it means to be American, but it's like a cultural fusion. It's kind of like the bananas and rice. You know, people don't really see, like, you know, it's you know, people don't think, oh, you can eat bananas with rice, but that's what it's like to be Somali and American. It's like that combination of banana and rice, but you're gonna get what I mean. So
you guys, this clip is so bizarre. I have so many thoughts. So first of all, I just think the way she's speaking is so odd with it's sort of like she's drunk or she's obviously not drunk if she's a good Muslim, but sort of like she's drunk and just on another planet, the way she's kind of rolling her head, rolling her eyes. And then obviously what she says is completely contradictory, right? Because she says being Somali, it's like it's not just bananas and rice. It's so much more than that. And then she like explains a bunch of vague, incoherent stuff about culture. And then she comes back to saying, it's kind of like the bananas and rice thing. And I thought about searching before this on, what the hell is this bananas and rice reference? Because I've never heard of it before. Is this supposed to be some sort of combination to do with Americanism and Somali culture? I have no clue. I sort of don't want to know just because this is so golden. And the whole performance, like she has the huge plaster, you might say band-aid on her forehead. So a lot of people are skeptical of this woman's story, of whether she really has a true account of her detainment by ICE, the people who go around arresting illegal migrants. Lots of controversy there. So let's look at another clip of her explaining what happened to her. And this ex-user, there's kind of a meme going around saying that, she's the new Jussie Smollett, who essentially is well known for this hoax crime he had on what was it again? He accused two white men of attacking him, racially profiling, but it was actually all staged, and it was two Nigerian men that he knew. So that's why they're referring to that and kind of saying, okay, this woman is lying. Now, I don't want to pass judgment because, or we're gonna speculate here, but I don't have any proof that she's lying. So let's just bear that in mind and check out.
And when I was in the middle, ICE came, they came out of their cars, they asked me to see my ID. And while they were asking me to see the ID, they just decided it was nice to be racist and say really nasty things to me. And yeah, that man, he called me the N-word, and he called me that, and then he arrested me. They arrested me. It was multiple people. They used a lot of force to arrest me.
That's a lot, isn't it? Because there's so much controversy over ICE, and it's hard to know online what's the truth and what's not. It seems like the left is saying the majority of them are horrible, they racially profile you, they just kidnap people at random, they're really racist, and they use too much force. And then the right is like, all these stories are, or the MAGA movement, they're saying all these stories are fabricated, they're not true. And I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. And watch out for my channel, because Brandon, who I interviewed, we also did a reaction to that trans bathroom video, a feminine gay man. We also have one more video coming up. It's a reaction to various viral ICE TikToks, and we debate how can we learn what is true and what is not about these mass deportations under the Trump administration. But isn't it a coincidence that this woman, given she's outspoken, she has these strong views and this bizarre stuff to say about Somali culture, but isn't it strange how she also just happens to be detained and then called the N-word? Like, the N-word is a lot, right? That's kind of as far as you can go in terms of, racial verbal abuse. And it just, obviously it might have happened. I'm not here to say this is all a lie, but it is interesting how she has the band-aids and she's going to come to her alleged violence against her. But it's just also quite an extreme story in that case. So let me know in the chat, in the comments, do you believe her? And let's listen to the rest of what she had to say.
I actually got a scab that was healing while I was in jail, but they pushed me hard. They used a lot of violence. My body still hurts. I got a concussion. It's really hard for me to speak because of that concussion. They were just using a lot.
Now, maybe that explains why she's slurring her words and just coming across, like I said, kind of drunk. So perhaps this is all just completely true. And they did concuss her. They called her the N-word. They detained her wrongfully. It's a lot to happen. Someone has to be extremely sadistic and bad at their job. But who knows? Strange things happen, right?
A lot of force to arrest me, and I was screaming, I was crying, I was so scared. I've like never been arrested in my life. I don't have like a criminal record. I have a clean record. It was just, and then that detainment, I was detained. I was literal cuffs were put on my legs, cuffs on my hands, and I was actually detained with a Native American woman. And I
mean, that's convenient too, right? Because there's been, you know, again, the MAGA movement says there's propaganda. The left is like, they're arresting Native American people everywhere, Native American people. And I think the reality, once again, is that there are a few isolated cases that have happened, which in my view, when you're taking under an operation like this and there's like thousands and thousands of arrests, I don't know, every week or however many they're doing, just through simple margin of error, there's going to be some people that are bad at their job, some people that get into the job for the wrong reasons, and which both of those should be mitigated as much as possible, by the way, but also errors like human error. And those stories are making really big profile, right? But that's not to say that those stories, if they're true, are not terrible and bad, and it's awful if you get detained wrongfully, right? But I think there's not much evidence that people are just getting detained on simply no basis other than the fact that they're not white. There usually has to be some sort of additional evidence, and if they're unable to present ID or proof that they're a citizen or a resident or have a visa, then I think this detainment follows. So there's so much we don't know about this. And I don't think the virality of this situation really makes it easier to know, because each side is trying to push their own agenda, right? But it also is just convenient here how, you know, one of the few cases of Native Americans being detained wrongfully, which obviously they are American citizens by account of their ethnicity and ancestry. It's just, you know, a lot of these things seem to happen at the same time here.
Bless her heart, she went through a lot too. She was also detained by ICE, and she was also a U.S. citizen, and like me, and she had gashes on her face. They shattered her windows. She had blood on her jeans, her corduroy jeans, and she was crying because she was so scared because she was with her dog. She was so scared that her dog got hurt. She was so scared for her life. We were both crying together. We were holding each other tight. And I'll never forget, like, the fear that we both felt in our hearts that day. And like, I'm so sorry if I'm getting a little emotional, but
some time. It's okay.
Thank you.
I don't know, guys. I mean, I have to say, just something doesn't seem right about this, but it may be the case that this is all true. Maybe it's somewhere in between. Perhaps there were some rough people. You know, perhaps she's embellishing slightly on some points. Wasn't super convinced by the crying there, but again, you know, this, I just want to caveat, this could be true, and I don't want to jump on this like, oh my God, this is just all lies. But, you know, it's a shame what's happened to that community in Minnesota in terms of, I guess, the portion of Somalis, I don't know how many there are, who are actually law-abiding citizens and kind of want to integrate as much as you can integrate with that get up. To be honest, that's pretty difficult in my opinion. American culture is quite specific, but considering all the fire they've come under for, you know, we're not just talking millions, but billions of dollars of fraud, you know, stolen from the government through, you know, counterfeit benefit schemes and these daycare centers. You know, there's going to be a large portion of the community who didn't do it but knew about it. And Ayan Hirsi Ali, the ex-Muslim author, she talks about, she's from Somalia herself, and she talks about how a lot of these people still retain their kind of clannish tribal culture. So when you lie and deceit, if it's in favor of the clan, that's actually, you know, on the moral side, right? Because that's what you need to protect. So I think because of all that, naturally, people have grown super skeptical. It's kind of like how the Pakistani rape gangs have affected the Pakistani community in this country. And obviously, for those who have no involvement, didn't know, disagree with it, even speak out on it, then that's wrong to just tar people all with the same brush. But this is the problem when our institutions fail us and they avoid addressing situations, you know, for fear of appearing racist or inflaming community tensions, because that stuff is going to come out eventually, everyone. And when it does, then actually prejudices and racism and community tensions are just amplified times 100. So the exact thing that they're attempting to avoid is actually what ends up happening. And a note further to that, I think that their excuses for saying, oh, well, we didn't want to inflame tensions, we didn't want to be racist. I think that's maybe part of it, but the main thing of it is votes. And the Democrats have been courting this community in Minnesota. And now they're reaping what they sow. And eventually, just like in the UK, that community will get big enough to be like, we don't need the Democrats anymore. So, RIP Minnesota, but we're going to see what happens there. And I think just like in relation to, so we also have this video in which she alleges that they were incredibly forceful with her, attacked her, but this video also allegedly shows her actually spitting on an ICE agent. So we're gonna take a look at that and see if we can make anything out here. So this is when she is getting arrested, right? Okay, so that's it. Yeah, so that was it. Maybe they show it in slow motion again. Oh yeah, here we go. See there? So who knows? Perhaps she did spit on them. I don't know. It's frustrating how much we don't know about this story, considering it's going so viral. But having said that, this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing with the whole ICE situation. There was this report just a few days ago in which they claimed a 5-year-old was detained by ICE just by himself. And actually what ICE came out and said is that they did not target the child, but the child was in fact abandoned by his father. And his dad is an illegal alien from Ecuador. And apparently his dad, ran out on his own kid. So it seems like that has been verified. But these are the kind of reports we're getting. And I find it quite similar to the, Israel-Palestine conflict, in that you get quite biased reporting coming out, possibly from both sides. And we're using a lot of like Hamas reported stuff for Gaza in particular. So it's difficult to sometimes know what is true. And that is very frustrating, right? But like I said, I think all of these things are subject to human error. So do let me know what you think of the Somali activist. Do you believe her claims? And we're going to be moving on to the next story. But quick one, if you are watching live, you want to send a super chat, then I'll bring it up on the screen and respond live, especially if you are adding an interesting comment. I really appreciate your support. All right, topic 2. Now, this one is one I'm super excited to talk about, right? Because for any tennis fans in the house, let me know, because I'm a huge tennis fan. I watch it obsessively. I watch it, have it in the background while I'm editing videos. And this is all about the Australian Open, which is currently on. So at the Australian Open, there was this woke journalist, in my opinion, who decided that the elite athletes, they're not just there to play sport, they're expected to act as political spokespeople. We see this a lot with actors and musicians. A lot of them just decide to do so themselves. But several top American players were pressed on their views on Donald Trump. And what's interesting wasn't their politics, but their responses. And we get a range of responses here, which I'd like to examine. So first of all, let's have a look at this first clip. And this is Jessica Pegula. She is an American. She's in the top 10. And this was her round 2 interview. I think they're all round 2 interviews in which she had won her match, and people were talking to her about her game and tennis and what she's working on, etc. But then this one journalist decided to bomb every conference and give the American players this question.
Congrats on the win. This is a pretty sensitive subject, but the U.S. is a year into the second Trump administration now, and a lot of people are suffering. And I'm wondering how you're feeling about things back home personally, and specifically what the mood is like in Florida.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I feel, I don't know. I don't like to kind of dabble too much into politics, just because it's just not the space that I really want to say that much on. But
yeah, exactly. Because you're a tennis player. I mean, I just feel like, celebrities should not be getting involved in this stuff publicly when they're there to make music, they're there to make movies, they're there to kind of lift people's spirits with sport, that people don't want to be lectured by these people. And we're talking about, millionaires and some billionaires in certain situations who are so out of touch, with just the life of a normal average person, that I think it's difficult for them to actually get behind those people's eyes and see things from both sides. Now, you can argue J.K. Rowling is like that in terms of trans issues, but I think a difference with her is possibly, you know, her background originally very working class, her kind of also the fact that she's just researched it so deeply. But I get the impression with a lot of celebrities, they just kind of see headlines and quickly have a statement that is pretty vacuous. But let's see what else she had to say, because so far she's managing the question pretty well, right?
Yeah, I just hope that everybody can kind of at some point come together and work together as far as situations, or whether it's political or not political in our country. I feel like, you know, we have a big country where there's a lot of media attention on us too. And that's tough because things definitely make their way around the world. And even me being in Australia, you hear about all these things going on back home. But I just hope, you know, that we can come together at some point with like a good dialogue where things can actually get accomplished and things that we want to see accomplished, and it not be so divisive, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, personally, I think that she handled that pretty well, right? Because she mainly just talked about us coming together. She talked about unity, divisiveness, and you know that could be actually from either side. That could be the Democrats, or it could be the Republicans, or the MAGA movement. So, I mean, that's the approach I would take. Be perfectly honest. Be vague. Just talk about us uniting, coming together, and no one can really say you said anything bad, but also no one can say that you took a side and, you know, you're a crazy Trump supporter or something. But, you know, she's actually, what's interesting here is there's kind of a racial aspect, because she has, I think it's some Korean ancestry. Might be getting that wrong, but she's not fully white. But this is then Amanda Anisimova, who is, I think, in the top 5 in the world. And she's also currently still in the tournament. This was her round 2 interview. And I think she has Eastern European or Russian heritage, but her response to this same question is pretty satisfying.
I've been asking a lot of the American players just how it feels to play under the American flag right now, and I'm curious how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in America, so I'm always proud to represent my country. And yeah, a lot of us are doing really well, and it's great to see a lot of, you know, great athletes on the women's side, on the men's side. So yeah, I feel like we're all doing a great job representing ourselves.
Very good, right? Because I feel, you can see her face, I feel like when he started that question, she was kind of preempting what it was about, but she kept it general, she kept it about America. But unfortunately, the journalist was not taking that for an answer, and he pressed her again. And this response is going to be one you want to hear.
Sorry, do you mind if I follow up?
Sure.
Sorry, just to clarify a little, I mean, sort of in the context of the last year of everything that's been happening in the US, does that complicate that feeling at all?
I don't think that's relevant.
And on to the next question. Let's just hear that one more time.
In the US, does that complicate that feeling at all?
I don't think that's relevant.
You know, she's just thinking, why are you trying to get me involved in this? And also, I think some of these journalists in these conferences, they go on and on. You know, I know that you may not be a tennis fan here, but I feel like some of them could be way better at wording their questions. Because if you think back to what that guy said, he said, you know, in light of everything going on in America in the past year, you know, what does that mean? Are you talking about the Trump administration? Are you talking about foreign policy? Are you talking about ICE? And it's so presumptuous in terms of just thinking that everyone automatically has this view that Trump is a terrible person. You know, I'm not here to really talk about that. I think he's, you know, my position has always been fairly clear in that he's a pretty gross, distasteful person, comes out with crazy shit, offensive shit, has done some really good things, and then has done some bad things too. But I just don't see why a tennis player should be having to comment on this. So I really liked her response. But then 2 more interesting responses. Here we have Coco Gauff, who again, I think is a world number 3, only 21 years old, and she had also won her second round.
This is a bit of a heavier question to start, but you're usually pretty outspoken about political issues, and I'm curious how you feel about the state of the US 1 year into the second Trump administration.
I mean, I think I've already stated my opinions in the past on how I feel about it. And yeah, I mean, I hope forward that we can have a lot more peace in our country and more kindness when the way we speak to each other about different topics and things like that. But yeah, obviously I've been pretty vocal about how I felt, and yeah, I don't feel at this point, I feel a bit fatigued talking about it just because of the fact that it is hard also, I think, being a Black woman in this country and having to experience things even online, and seeing your marginalized communities being affected, and knowing that I can only really donate and speak out, and I try my best to do that. But yeah, I just hope that as time continues that we can reach a state where we're not currently in and we keep moving forward. I post.
So like some, didn't like some. She kept it vague in some regard again, so I think that's probably wise, but it does seem like she is a bit outspoken on some of this stuff. I mean, I remember during the BLM movement, you know, her and Naomi Osaka and a few people were coming on to their matches with like these black square things, you know, in solidarity with that. And there have been some woke moments, I think, from both of them in interviews. But, you know, she's in Australia, so when she's talking about being a Black woman in this country, I don't know if is she talking about the States? And again, it's kind of just difficult to take from someone who is, you know, she's won over $30 million in prize money, and she's extremely successful. I would argue she's probably quite privileged, being, you know, someone who obviously was born with the ability to possess amazing talent. And also, generally, tennis players are from a background in which their families can send them to private school and in which they can pay for their lessons. And, you know, it's a very expensive sport to start out with. But of course, she's worked extremely hard. So it's just difficult to, I think, for people to relate to that kind of stuff. And again, she kind of talks about coming together and kindness. And it's like, it's quite weak arguments, like, you know, when you're talking about Trump's foreign policy on Israel or ICE or mass, you know, illegal immigration or whatever. So, you know, keeping it reasonably vague, but I think there's a bit of wokey in there. So one more. This is Madison Keys, and she was asked the same question.
This is a pretty sensitive subject, but you know, a year into the second Trump administration, tensions in the U.S. are pretty ridiculously high, and I'm just wondering, how do you feel personally about what the Trump administration has been doing, and how has it felt to you when you've spent time in the U.S.?
I think my stance has been...
I feel like you can just see their eyes being like, oh God, I mean, here we go, because some of these journalists are nasty, honestly.
Pretty obvious. I think it's pretty obvious where I stand. And I am hopeful that we as a country can come together and get back to the values that I think make our country great. I am not a fan of divisiveness, and I think the beauty of the US is we are a mixing pot. We are very diverse. We are a home of immigrants, and I hope that we can get back to those values.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with quite a lot of that. Love her, but it's just the way that they talk in these terms. Like, if you're going to give an opinion on immigration or diversity as our strength, at least explain what you mean, because the criticisms on the Trump administration from a racial and immigration point of view is about illegal immigration. So a lot of people don't like the fact that he's trying to deport hundreds and thousands, if not millions, of illegal migrants in the US. And it's estimated that up to 10 million came in under the Biden administration alone, crossing the southern border. So if you want to talk about divisiveness, it's like, are you talking about the fact that this new administration is trying to resolve that catastrophe? Or are you actually also thinking that the Biden administration and Kamala Harris were incredibly divisive as well, you know, in terms of how they opened the borders and didn't care and caused a lot of violence and fear and, you know, unfairness in the system? So I think there's divisiveness on both sides, but I hate when they just knowingly conflate illegal immigration stances to legal, because honestly, there may be some things here or there, but I do not fundamentally believe, for all of what he is, he may be a misogynist, he's a pig or whatever, but I don't think Trump is actually a racist. I think he's against illegal migration. And I think he recognizes some cultures are possibly more compatible with the US than others, like Somali culture. But overall, I just don't, I don't see him as any kind of white nationalist figure. And I think it's fine to say that you can believe that and you can still hate Trump. So guys, let me know, what was your favorite response there? Mine was definitely Amanda's, where she just said, I don't think that's relevant. Let's move on. I would definitely be adopting that approach if I wasn't an annoying gay boy on the internet talking about all my opinions all the time. Would much prefer to be a tennis player, although I love this, right? Okay, we're going to come on to our next topic. Before I say that, if you are enjoying my commentary and you like this, you can subscribe to my channel. If you're not yet, I invite you to. You can like the video. I do make serious commentary. I make fun videos. I make live streams just like this, and subscribing actually helps this channel reach new people. And I've been setting, lots of New Year's resolutions. You might notice that things on my channel have got a little bit more consistent. There's a lot more stuff going out. So really appreciate your support, and everyone in the comments. I see you. I'm trying to read them as I go. Fortunately, I don't have a producer, so I have to do all of this weird tech stuff myself. But let's move on to this next story, all right? So apparently Shakespeare was a Black woman, right? And this week's this new academic argument went semi-mainstream, right? Claiming that William Shakespeare doesn't really exist. He was actually a Black Jewish woman writing under a male pen name. And no, this isn't satire. This actually is coming from a book by, an actual author who went to the London School of Economics. And, this really helps us question what the hell is coming out of our higher education system and our universities, and the kind of crazy things that they believe. We're looking into this theme of decolonization here, where we look through history and we essentially try to kind of de-whiteify and de-manify anything, try and recognize that actually there were suppressed women, there were suppressed other people. In some regards, that's true. But, even this goes so far as to try and say, actually, the most famous playwright in the world in history happened to be a Black Jewish woman, right? But who knows? Perhaps there is some validity to this claim. So let's just take a look at what's being said in this Telegraph article. So Shakespeare was a Black woman, book claims. Bard was a female Jew of the North African origin, feminist historian argues. It claims that the truth of Shakespearean authorship has been hidden by centuries of Western-centric and Eurocentric ideology. They're kind of, this is the toxic masculine white supremacy here. The author contains that the real Bard was a cosmopolitan woman with a, I love cosmopolitan, with a multicultural identity. This woman is identified in the new work titled The Real Shakespeare as the historical figure Amelia Banasso. She's a real person, and she was a fixture in his life, apparently. And up until now, there's been other discussions about her. As far as I know, I'm no expert on Shakespeare, but there's been discussions about her actually being someone that he writes about in some of his poetry, although it's not confirmed. So that's a pretty logical, skepticism or, wondering to have. But claiming that she was actually him and, he'd never existed is interesting, right? So it's claimed that she wrote under the Shakespeare pen name and wrote a canon of plays only for her work to be stolen by an uneducated interloper from Stratford upon Avon. This interloper, whom we now know as William Shakespeare, was then revered by posterity because of the idea of white genius was preferred to a Black female playwright. And, these are all just, you'll see in a minute when we look at her London School of Economics blog. But, you kind of wonder, well, is there some real proof in this? Here's the book, The Real Shakespeare, by Irene Coslet. She's a feminine historian. She told the Telegraph, if Shakespeare was a female of color, this would draw attention to issues of peace and justice in society. So notice that she says, if Shakespeare was a female of color, then it serves a political agenda, which immediately makes me skeptical over, is this kind of an objective analysis over whether Shakespeare was a Black woman, Black Jewish woman or not. Well, I think this kind of first came out because of this article on the LSE, right? So she actually attended LSE And if you look at her bio, it says Irene Coslet has devoted over 2 decades to the study and practice of gender equality across multiple countries, focusing on gender and development and gender-based violence. She holds an MSc in media, comms and development at LSE. So it's interesting how, you know, she's just someone who already dedicates a lot of her life to gender and gender equality, and she's clearly, you know, quite into these topics. So Kawinki, she managed to objectively prove that the biggest playwright in the history of time was a Black Jewish woman, right? You know, I'm surprised that it's not a Black trans woman. You know, that would have been more apt, in my opinion, because you gays know who's watching that Black trans women won us our rights. And, you know, they threw the first brick at Stonewall, Marsha P. Johnson, all that. You know, I'm kidding. But, you know, if the Jew thing is funny because a lot of the left these days don't like the Jews, right? So perhaps this was a bit premature. Okay, so let's see like why some of her reasonings here. So one part is why authorship matters. So one of the key insights of my framework is to look at the notion of author function detailed by Michel Foucault. So some of you may be familiar with this guy. He was, I guess, what we now describe as a queer theorist or postmodernist, although we did not have that terminology at the time. But he kind of mainstreamed some of these ideas on questioning what we believe to be true, which is kind of the foundations of queer theory. A lot of nonsense, in my opinion, just unraveling everything for the sake of it. And one thing that he's notorious for is actually advocating for the decriminalization of minor and adult sexual relations. So there is a high assumption that he was actually pedophilic himself, although this is not proven. And every time I see these queer theorists, Judith Butler lovers, you know, postmodernists, kind of having a hard on over him, I always think, well, you know, this is potentially a guy who thought it was right to have sex with children. And if that's the case, then I'm not sure how much we should trust of what he says. But having said that, she refers to him that the identity of the author might be irrelevant for the purposes of interpretation of the text. But according to him, the role of the author goes well beyond the scope of textual criticism from the collective standpoint. So basically, we're saying that actually, you know, the author itself matters in the context of understanding what they have to say. And because of that, she has noticed some trends in what Shakespeare writes about, which apparently proves that she was a Black trans, sorry, not trans, a Black Jewish lady. You see I'm falling into it. So she talks about this concept called subaltern. I've never heard of it, but it is a narrative by hegemonic West, and in particular by white men as the subject. The subaltern is silenced. Female and Black identities are suppressed and constructed as the other. Depicting female and Black identities as the other justifies and perpetrates the domination of the white male subject. The erasure of identities in the racialized and patriarchal narration of history reinforces prescribed roles and power relations in society. So, I mean, this is basically saying that, well, because these types of identities and genders have been marginalized over time, then it is wise to assume that a lot of the, you know, celebs of the past, of history, are actually part of this collection of people, which again does not prove anything whatsoever. It's kind of wishful thinking, in my opinion. One other point I'd like to touch on here is Shakespeare the feminist, right? So she says there's a scholarly consensus that Shakespeare was a feminist. Okay. Today, the so-called feminist criticism of Shakespeare is a consolidated field of study in academia, having originated in the 1970s, focused on gender roles and the representation of women in the canon. It is generally acknowledged that Shakespeare came close to the positions of today's radical feminism. Wow, that's a big claim, right? But this is kind of like rewriting history, saying, you know, Joan of Arc was non-binary or whatever, that bullshit. That concept didn't exist in the past. So you cannot argue that really. You could basically say under today's framework, where Joan of Arc were to be living in a Western society in 2026, would she herself be saying she's non-binary, which even that is a tenuous claim, right? So in a similar fashion, the concept of feminism didn't exist. So you can't claim that he was a feminist, even if you try and pick out all the bits of his work which apparently advocate for feminism. And that's great that that comes out. Like perhaps he actually had a good understanding of women. But, you know, she's basically saying here, well, because he was a feminist, as far as I know, this is how I understand it, and of his time, you know, a man would not have been that way. So therefore we can conclude or deduce from that it was a Black Jewish woman. So my research concludes that the pioneer of the Western world in English language was a subaltern. So again, this is someone who's been erased from history, a Black Jewish woman challenging the Eurocentric and patriarchal paradigm. You know, I really don't feel like she's proved it in this blog anyway. Maybe the book has some better arguments, but let me know, guys. Are you going to be buying this book? It is called, what's it called again? The Real Shakespeare. And I don't know why the woman here is not Black, because it's supposed to be a Black Jewish woman. So I don't know, guys. Doesn't seem likely, does it? I mean, I'd love to have, perhaps ChatGPT will give me a good summary of the book once we get through it. Once it comes out, rush to buy your copy. Well, everyone, we're making good progress. We have one more topic today, and this is a fun one. It's a bit of lighthearted comedy, and it is actually of a clip that has been resurfaced from some sports conference. So let me just get it up on screen here. This resurfaced panel from a women's sports conference perfectly captures the contradiction that no one seems to want to address. We keep seeing this come up. So on stage here, we have a quote-unquote transgender woman, trans-identified male footballer who is arguing for inclusion in women's sports. You know, no surprise. Alongside a Muslim woman in a full niqab, face veil, you know, it's kind of one step away from the burqa, discussing modesty and participation. And their views on women's bodies, visibility, and sport are, you know, I'm going to let you decide. Are they compatible in any way? Yet they are presented as ideological allies. So this queer Islam alliance, we're seeing more and more of it. And it seems to only work as long as nobody is allowed to ask them basic questions. But let's see how this went. And first, we're going to hear from, let's hear from the trans one first, all right? Because I think the other one's even more funny. Okay, here we go.
In terms of, like, so obviously my work is with the transgender and non-binary community normally. So let's actually, could we give them a sense of gender euphoria in terms of sportswear? And unfortunately, in terms of the major manufacturers these days, we're only starting to see, for example, in football, the first female football boot's been made specifically for females. So we're obviously very young in this area. But we're looking at, so 0.02% of the population in the UK at the moment. So you're talking about 600,000-ish people that do not have, you know, don't have an atypical male body, they don't have an atypical female body, they have somewhere in between. So if you're looking at transmasculine hormone treatment, it changes the body obviously for a masculinization, and obviously transfeminine, it changes the body for obviously feminizing.
You guys, like, I almost have weekend brain here because, you know, I have to pay attention so strong to these wokies to understand what they're saying. But isn't this just, you know, the epitome of like the 2020s, where we have a man who says he's a woman arguing for gender, how we can give athletes gender euphoria, trans athletes in sport based on their outfits. And then this woman next to him who has every single piece of skin of her body covered except her hands and her eyes. It is wild. It is wild. And you know, it's a good point there. So Catherine is saying, how can you tell he's trans? Well, you know, from a glance, I guess you can't, but then based on what he's saying and the breasts that look like, you know, perhaps he is one of these people.
But it doesn't quite reach the full scale of an atypical female. So could sports, and could the sports industry, for example, we heard from Castor yesterday, could we, you know, we heard from, you know, smaller businesses like Fowdy's, for example, could they actually start designing, you know, transgender specific sportswear? It's quite interesting, because obviously we're talking about transgender inclusion, but we're actually more talking about transgender exclusion, especially in terms of the transgender female side of things these days. And as I said, unfortunately, I stand before you as one of the 20-odd banned footballers at the moment. So, hello. Yeah,
not banned footballer, just not allowed to participate in women's sports. And you look like a rather tall person. I don't think you should be anywhere near women's sports, Mr. Thing.
So, obviously, since the Supreme Court ruling, most sports are now moving to exclude transgender women from the female category. I have someone who's played in women's football for the past 10 years, never had any issues. I might be Scottish, but I represented England, which my family nearly disowned me for. So, like, it's the big...
That's what your family disowned you for? I'm sorry, that was mean. You know, if I had a kid and they decided to go the full medical route transition, I would not disown them. I'd do everything I could to maintain the relationship in spite of all the challenges. So I just want to caveat that.
The biggest barrier to that is, like, for example, of myself, is I no longer have access to the support networks and, you know, the teams and, you know, the competition that I had before. But this is, you know, someone from me who's had a 10-year career in football, you know, so I've got these connections, I've got these friends, that I've had the opportunity. The saddest thing is for the ones that are just starting. And I just want to give you a story of a little...
Yeah, so you may not have that stuff now, but you could have it for a male football shtick, right? And, you know, he says career, so it's like, is he a professional footballer? Because if that's the case, he definitely should not be playing in women's football.
17-year-old who actually played our first season, so 17-year-old wee trans girl. Basically, we did some work with our football.
Why are you talking about a 17-year-old wee trans girl? That just sounds weird.
Football team. And so we asked our football team, just, you know, asking questions, you know, what do you want to do in football? What do you do in football? They're like, I want to be a lioness. I want to win the World Cup. I want to do this. I want to do that. And we spoke to, let's just call her Laura at the moment. We spoke to Laura, and Laura's dream...
Okay, that story's boring. So, I mean, what do you think she's thinking, this one here? Because she seems to be someone who believes in very rigid gender roles, such to the case that she feels, you know, the right thing for a woman to do is just not show her face to public ever, but only have that for her husband and children. Meanwhile, here you have a man who thinks that you can get a boob job and say that you're a lady and then play sports with women who also, in the case of footballers, by this woman's standard, the burqa lady would be showing too much skin. So, I mean, it's very, very, very interesting, the whole thing. So let's see what she had to say. Maybe she's going to make her case a bit clearer.
I'm going to ask you guys, is there a certain kit that we should wear for any sports? Are we able to wear anything that we want to wear whilst we're playing sport? These are...
Well, no, obviously not. Like, should you wear a banana hammock wearing... No. Should you wear a furry costume playing tennis? No. Should you wear a wrestling, you know, outfit, whatever they call that when you're wrestling? Yes. Are there appropriate attire to wear when you're on a horse and you're a jockey or playing polo? Yes. In the swimming pool, you know, there's clear reasons for the attire that have developed over time pertaining to each sport because of the aerodynamics, because of the types of shoes that you wear. I mean, there obviously should be a baseline for what you should be wearing in a given sport.
The sort of questions that we need to ask ourselves, and as an advocate for Muslim women and girls who dress like me, we should be able to wear what we want, what we're comfortable in when we're doing certain sports, as long as we're not injuring anyone or harming anyone else. I cycle regularly, and I've had a lot of hate because of the way I look, the way I dress. And I do just go out looking like I am right now whilst I'm on my cycle.
I mean, you don't really look like anything except a bin bag, really. Sorry, guys, but I'm just really not on board. Like, as in hijab, fine. I think they're still a bit depressing, the hijab, you know, hiding all that beautiful hair. But this is just like, you know, Boris Johnson said it right. She does look like a letterbox, and if you saw a letterbox cycling, you would be pretty surprised. So I know you might think that that's harsh, but fundamentally, you know, for someone who is actually reasonably progressive in some ways, I think this is very regressive. I don't think we should have it in this country. And if you're trying to argue that, oh, well, people like me should be able to play sports and wear this. I mean, can you imagine her like toddling down the football pitch with that. It's like, how would we even know if we can pass her the ball or she's going to pass it to us? Like, we can't see her facial expression. And some sports, some team sports, it's very important to see your opponents or your proponents' facial expressions and face. So I just feel like these people, minorities who choose certain things that are, weird or very countercultural, we're in a stage now where they do not recognize that those choices have trade-offs, and that, in order for them to be protected and live their life, they need to be, in the approval or protection of the majority group. And that goes for gay people too, right? I can only live a good life if I keep the straight majority on board with my lifestyle and the fact that I should be able to love who I love or whatever without it being criminalized. That is that's probably the most crucial factor in terms of me being safe and free, which is why we talk about a lot of this damage control with the trans, the TQIA+. And this is no different. It's like, if you want to be protected under British law to wear the burqa and niqab, then stop pushing for more and more, because what's going to happen is people are going to get sick of this. They don't want their daughters, skirting around the field with a bunch of burqas next to them while they're trying to just have fun and get down and dirty in the football pitch. They are going to get pissed off, and then you're going to end up with less rights. And that's exactly what this, trans thing next to her, it has happened with him. It's like they've asked for too much. And maybe if they had kept things under the radar and not gone after children and advocated for third spaces, maybe there would have been some sports that people are like, okay, fine, whatever. This isn't like a major thing. I still think that would be wrong, but this is the truth of where we're at, right?
Bang traffic time, and I will get horned at, and I will get everything out. But is it because of the way I look? Why? Why are we going through this in 2025? There shouldn't be this expectation that we need to look or dress a certain way to play certain sports. Everybody should be given that option, that choice to wear what they want. And I'm going to steal a tagline from.
So just like whatever you want, I can just wear like a fireman outfit to play, to go swimming or to play rugby. I mean, obviously that's ridiculous, but if I can't wear a fireman costume or, a scream costume, then why do you get to wear the niqab and still play ping pong? Like, it's not fair.
The Sweaty Betty Foundation, who have very, very recently just starts in the changing room. Young girls are facing challenges in the changing rooms in schools because there's a stigma that they need to look a certain way whilst they're playing sport, and it shouldn't be like that. At CRIMS, we advocate and we allow the women and the girls to, as long as they're comfortable, to look and dress the way they want whilst they're playing any sport. And that's how.
Yeah, I just really struggle with this, because the whole ideology behind this niqab is that she feels it's improper for, the idea is that it's improper for women to show their faces because it is immodest, and there's a risk that some men won't be able to control their sexual impulses if they just see your face, not your boobs, not your lower parts, not your legs, not your hair. It's everything plus your face. And even in some Muslim countries, they make them wear gloves so they conceal their hands. I mean, it's the most misogynistic thing ever. But how does she sit there, who clearly is someone who possesses this worldview, or whose husband possesses that worldview, and then still make this argument that we should be able to wear whatever we want? So are we going to get, someone playing baseball and there's like one girl in a bikini and then another girl just like running around the posts in a burqa? I just don't understand. I mean, there is an aspect to uniformity in team sports and in schools that actually helps build team spirit and form team identity. So I think that's really important if you do have a uniform for your sport, because it helps bring people together, and otherwise everyone's just trying to express their own individual, weird, bizarre outfit choices. So I don't know. It's just this whole, like you can kind of get the queers for Palestine thing, but then when it's like queers for burqa, makes no sense at all to me how those two things are going hand in hand, especially because all the queer stuff is like so degenerate, and it has this aesthetic of like, let's just look as gross and disgusting as possible, and that's countercultural and cool. Well, everyone, I appreciate you giving me your time on a Saturday. There's been lots of comments. I've been reading all of them, so I really appreciate that. Thank you to the person who said my hair looks good. I did kind of diffuse dry it beforehand, although it looks a little bit gappy. But hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to wrap up the YouTube section here. If you are a Substack subscriber, the show continues with one more topic. I'm going to be looking at the Green Party's legal row over fairy pronouns. Yeah, that's still a thing. And why parts of British politics still seem to be stuck in the year 2020. And Substack is where I get a bit more candid. You know, you might think I'm a bit acerbic here, but it gets even more cutting and unfiltered over there. And if you want to support my work, that is exactly how you do it. So link is in the description of this video. And if you are joining on Substack, I'll see you there. Otherwise, I'll see you guys for more videos coming next week, as well as another live stream. So have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone. Mm-mm-mm-mm.